Digimon Story Time Stranger has an absolutely cracking set of storylines. If you like your RPGs with a bit of bounce, this one's got more than just dynamic combat. From voluptuous visuals to thick lore, this game does not skip leg day or story depth. It's not shy about showing off its assets, but it's the narrative that really holds your attention. Between the bold character designs and layered storytelling, it's hard to know where to look first. With a seductive gameplay loop that will leave you thirsty for another installment, Bandai Namco's latest entry into the iconic monster taming series blends fan service with finesse, crafting a world that is as alluring as it is addictive. Yes guys, welcome to VG Vault, a video game channel. I am your host Matt, and today we are going to be doing a review for Digimon Story Time Stranger. Now I've literally been waiting 26 years for this game to come out, and what I mean by that is I've played not all of, but a lot of the entries into the Digimon video game franchise in between Digimon World on the PS1 up until now with Digimon Story Time Stranger. I have just never, ever been able to get into a Digimon game quite as much as I did with this one. TLDR, it's good. It's really good. Go and play it if you haven't already. But if you'd like a bit more of an in-depth analysis on why I think this game was so good, then stick around. But guys, before we get into it, if you're enjoying the content and you would like to see more, please do me the distinct honor of liking and sharing the video, subscribe to the channel, or just roast me in the comments, whatever gets you through your day. And without further ado, let's get into it, starting with the story. So with all jokes about voluptuous angel and goth mummies aside, Digimon Story Time Stranger actually had a good story. It's more of a JRPG in this respect. Now, one of the things about the story is it's not even necessarily, like, I'm okay if a story isn't 10 out of 10. Like, I love a good story in a game, don't get me wrong, but a story can be a 6, 7 out of 10 and I can still really, really enjoy the game. If I'm being honest, the story, it's not up there with like Final Fantasy 9 or whatever, which is, you know, one of my favorite JRPGs of all time, but it's significantly better than the previous Digimon entries, and for the most part, the majority of stories in monster taming games in general. Story isn't always something that monster taming games get really right. Ultimately, the main allure of these types of games for me is the mechanics. So you start off as a kid, adult, teenager, I'm not 100% sure, but you work for an investigative agency that is looking into phase electron life forms, and this is like the human words for Digimon, right? You get thrown into this world right in the middle of some sort of conflict between people and Digimon. Now, for the most part, this is not going to be a spoiler-laden review. I'm going to keep things quite light in terms of detail. But in general, the story was good. It starts off quite slowly, but I actually kind of appreciated that, because after taking so long to get into a game like this, like waiting for a new Digimon game to come out, I enjoyed just being able to really revel in the gameplay for the first kind of big section that you spend the majority of in the human world. The biome diversity is not crazy. It's, you know, it's sewers. It's basically just sewers for the first few hours. But at the end of the day, it does a good job of establishing its characters and its narrative, and, you know, not giving you any really crazy moments. There's some really good story moments at the beginning, but at the same time, it's not like, and nothing compared to what comes later. So for me, it did a good job of just kind of bedding me into it. When you get into the digital world, that's when things really start kicking off. And I don't think that's a spoiler. We've all seen it in the trailers, right? If you haven't played the game. But yeah, for me, the story was paced well. Yes, it started slowly, but that gave me a lot of time to just kind of find my feet with the game itself. And then by the time the story had started picking up, I really, really knew what I was doing, because there are quite a lot of deep mechanics in it. We'll get into that a bit later. As far as characters go, truth be told, the only good characters in the game for me were the Digimon. All of the human characters, for the most part, were a little bit dull. But ultimately, you spend so much time with the Digimon that's not really a huge issue. You're followed around constantly by a girl called Inori. She is quite just a bit of a blank canvas with a, you know, she's got a sad backstory and stuff that you find out about later in the game, but ultimately, like, just not really a super engaging character to be around. I actually found her dad to be quite an interesting character, but he doesn't actually have a huge amount of screen time throughout the game. He's quite present at the beginning, but kind of disappears. And like I say, the human characters for me didn't really hold much weight. The Digimon characters, on the other hand, I thought were absolutely brilliant. As soon as you get into the digital world and you get into the village, oh man, the village, mate, oh, I swear. Again, it's so hard not to cross over into the next bits of the review that I want to get into. But like I say, when you get into the digital world and you start dealing with the conflicts between the different Digimon, and you start meeting main Digimon characters, 100%, that they were the ones that did it for me in terms of like keeping me, really getting me engaged in the story. The human characters felt very much just like a medium in order to get you to the Digimon characters and to kind of set up, you know, the reason why the Digimon characters have so much weight. And as you get towards the end, again, absolutely no spoilers, but it kicks off and it's all big, massive, epic twists and turns and JRPG, Final Fantasy style stuff. And I really, really liked it, man. I really, really liked it. So yeah, for me, the story was like, I'm not going to number everything, but if I had to, I'll give it like a 6 or 7 out of 10. In its entirety, it definitely got better towards the end. There was quite a lull at the beginning. Human characters were a bit of a letdown. The Digimon characters were mostly written really, really well, and it was a mixed bag. But like I say, for me personally, the story doesn't have to be amazing for me to really appreciate a game. Obviously, the better the story, the better the game for the most part, but it was good enough for me to really, really enjoy it. Right, so with story out of the way, we're going to get into the mechanics. So for the most part, Digimon plays like your kind of standard JRPG turn-based battling system. The overworld stuff is not exactly particularly inspired. So, you know, you're just kind of running around areas, picking up stuff. The areas aren't particularly open either. Do you know what I mean? Exploration isn't particularly rewarding. There's a few like nooks and crannies where you can go and find stuff, but ultimately it is a bit on rails, I guess. Now, I didn't really find that to be a problem because that's kind of how the story works. You know what I mean? It is generally a lot harder to write a really engaging story in a big open world than it is in something that's got you a bit more on rails. But like I said, personally, I didn't really have a problem with that. As far as the actual combat goes itself, like I say, it is your standard take your turn, everyone gets their turn, JRPG turn-based combat. That was cool, but it did throw a few extra things into the mix. With monster taming games, we're all used to elemental weaknesses and resistances, right? But it kind of went a bit further than that. So every Digimon has a type between data, vaccine, and virus, and there's actually 3 other ones, but data, vaccine, and virus has got your rock, paper, scissors stuff going on, and there's a few other types that are kind of outside that. And on top of that, they also have actual elements like fire and ice and electric and all of that, and they've got myriad weaknesses and strengths against each other, and basically they all play into the same thing. So for instance, if you are a vaccine Digimon, if you've got a vaccine Digimon and you're fighting a virus Digimon, your attack damage will get a boost against that Digimon. If you happen to be a vaccine type Digimon that's also an electric type and you're fighting a virus water, then you'll get an even bigger boost on top of that as well. So that kind of kept me on my toes for a little bit, because for the first 5 or 6 hours, I was just brute forcing my way through the game. Even if my attack percentage was lower, I was still just kind of going for it. But as the game goes on and progresses and gets a bit more difficult, especially when the bosses get involved, you have to start paying more attention to that stuff. So that was another cool thing I liked about the game as well. Like, it allowed me to brute force myself and then sort of threw these difficulty curves at me that made me go, oh, hold on, I've actually got to learn how to play this game. I can't just keep brute forcing my way through it. And ultimately, I guess you could if you just religiously grinded, do you know what I mean? But that's another thing, because the game is not really open and it's quite linear. The only way to really grind is to go back and forth through the kind of tunnels and dungeons and stuff, because when you exit a room, all the Digimon that you had defeated will then come back. So the grind could be a little bit tedious in that point, because, you know, you kind of kept on running back and forth between the same place. But at the end of the day, if you wanted to grind, the ability is there. It's just obviously not how they want you to play the game. They give you the option to grind if you want to, but evidently the game wants you to learn its systems to get through it that way. In terms of catching the Digimon, they have just, because it's a continuation of the Digimon Story series, which in particular has a catching mechanic that is based around just defeating enemies, right? So there's no like use an item to catch it or whatever. It is literally every single time you battle a Digimon and you defeat it, you get a conversion percentage. And when that conversion percentage reaches 100, you can then kind of magically create that Digimon out of the data that you've received. It goes all the way up to 200%. And essentially, the closer you get to 200%, the better your Digimon is going to be. So at the end of the day, for the most part, if you're going to play this game, always try to go for the 200. There's like, it just does make quite a big difference in terms of all of the other little mechanics that go on within it as well. Leveling up isn't just as simple as gaining levels. You have to essentially increase your Digimon's ability to level up by digivolving and de-digivolving, and you can merge Digimon together, or load enhancement it's called, in order to raise their bond level. And as their bond level goes up, then so does their levels, right? So if your standard Digimon at the beginning might max out at level 20. If you digivolve it, that might go up by 5. If you de-digivolve it, raise it up, and then digivolve it again, you've spent more time with it, the bond has grown, that might go up to 30. They max out at 99, but like I say, it's not just as simple as go out, fight, level up, like it is in like a Pokemon or a Final Fantasy or something. It kind of boxes you in a little bit, and that makes, that just makes it a little bit more interesting, because you actually have to think a little bit more about how you want to raise the Digimon that you're going to raise, especially if you're going for certain Digivolutions. Now, Digivolutions, that's another thing. I like the way they handle it, man. It's very complicated in Digimon compared to something like Pokemon. Everyone's got their own evolution line, and that is basically just how it is. Occasionally they branch off, like your Eevees, or some other Pokemon can evolve into 2 or 3 different forms. Digimon is a bit of a free-for-all, right? So if you've seen the show or you know anything about Digimon, you'll know that Agumon turns into Greymon, Greymon turns into Metal Greymon, Metal Greymon turns into War Greymon, and so on and so forth. And they do, not all of them, but some of them do have like their individual lines, right? But outside of that, every Digimon can kind of digivolve into 5, 6 other options, other forms, and also digivolve back into 2 or 3 different forms. So it's really interesting, because for instance, I had an Agumon from the start, not from the very beginning because it wasn't one of the starter choices, but I had an Agumon at the beginning, and I was like, I really want a War Greymon because I loved that when I was a kid, and I was trying to raise him up for ages. And I was like, oh man, the stats that he needs are so hard, this is going to take me a really long time. And I ended up getting my first War Greymon from a different Digimon that wasn't even a Metal Greymon. It was kind of crazy. And I was like, oh, what? And that's another thing about the mechanics, man. Like, it's a little bit overwhelming at the start, truth be told. But each Digimon also has a personality, right? There's 4 different, think kind of like natures in Pokemon, but not really. Each Digimon has got one of these 4 personality types, and you have a perk tree that has 5 different kind of sections in it, and 4 of these sections attribute to a different individual personality type. So, for instance, Valor is one of the personality types, right? If your Digimon is a Valor Digimon, and you've leveled up your Valor perk tree quite a lot, and not your amicable one, which is like the friendship one or whatever, you could have 2 Agumon, one that is a Valor one and one's an amicable one, and it could be harder for your amicable one to digivolve than your Valor one, even though same Digimon, do you know what I mean? Same Digimon, same potential Digivolution branches and stuff, but if you've leveled up your Valor abilities more than your amicable abilities, then you're going to get the War Greymon from your amicable Agumon first. That whole thing took me about into halfway to the game to really figure out, right? Because I was just kind of like, oh yeah, but I've had this Agumon from the start, so I want to get him through. Do you know what I mean? It's like, one negative with this system is it makes it a little bit harder to get attached to your Digimon ultimately at the end of the day, because in Pokemon and stuff, like, you get your little, your Charmander and you turn him into your Charizard and you take him through the whole game and you become really attached to that Pokemon, right? It's a bit harder to do that in Digimon because it's so easy to get so many of them because of the conversion thing, and you might be working really hard on getting a specific Digimon that you want from your Agumon line, and then something else completely random can turn into the War Greymon first instead, and you're just like, well, I guess I'll just do that then instead. And it's, it swings and roundabouts, man, because your bond is going to be higher with your Agumon you spent more time with. But if by some random chance you've leveled up your agent stats in a certain way, it might be easier to get that one with something else. That being said, my final team was comprised of at least 2 Digimon that I took the entire way through the game with me. So I was quite happy about that. But the game does make it a little bit harder to really get attached to your Digimon when it's just like, it's just a bit of a free-for-all, man. Do you know what I mean? And ultimately, the aim is to get the best team you possibly can. So it's, sometimes it's a bit illogical to kind of stick with this one that you've been with for ages when you've just got something else and that option is there a little bit easier. And unfortunately, that is just how it is with the mechanics that they've got in place. Overall, I like the mechanics of the game. And one thing I actually did really like about them is it took me a long time to kind of get the hang of it as well. It was something where I was halfway through the game and I was like, oh, I've really got to figure this thing out. Do you know what I mean? I didn't just figure it out in the first 3-4 hours in the game and just kind of run with it. Like I say, I was able to brute force my way through most of the beginning part that was all in the human world. When it got to the Digimon world and the bosses started coming a little bit thicker and faster, then I was like, oh, actually, I've got to figure some more stuff out. So I really liked that random comparison. But Ghost of Tsushima kind of did a similar thing where it introduced different mechanics to you throughout the game right up until the end. So it kind of kept things feeling fresh and give you new enemy types and new ways of doing things. Although maybe this wasn't the purpose of Digimon, ultimately it ended up playing out that way for me, where I kept on getting this kind of burst of, oh, I've just learned how to do this thing. And that kind of gave kept the game fresh and gave it a sense of newness even really, really far into my playthrough. The only other major difference there was in combat was the boss fights, right? So the boss fights, I really enjoyed the boss fights. I've seen some reviews and some people say that they could be a bit tedious, but I actually really, really liked them. So the bosses had a specific mechanic that were exclusive to the boss fights, right? And every now and again, they would start charging up for this super move, and then a new bar, like I almost call it like an endurance bar or something, would appear underneath their health bar. And if you didn't knock down that health bar before they finished charging up their move, then they were going to hit you with an absolutely massive move, and that could either wipe out your squad or make you have to go through like a load of healing items and stuff. So yeah, that was, some people said it was a bit annoying, and I didn't mind it, man. What I did find quite difficult is, I said there was a couple of difficulty curves and stuff, like right up until the last third of the game, I'd mostly kind of been okay. And then I started running into these fights where I built my team based almost entirely around physical damage, because again, that's another mechanic. There's physical damage and magic damage, right? So most of my team, if not all of it, was based around big, strong physical attackers. And then all of a sudden, this boss comes out of nowhere that just throws up the shield that completely repels and counters physical damage. And I was just like, oh, wait, what? What do I do now? And that really threw me for six, man, because again, that made me engage with the magic side more. And it wasn't just like a preference thing. It was like, oh no, here's a situation I've been put in where the way that I've thrown my team together has made this fight 10 times harder than it needed to be. So that was fun, man. That was fun. Do you know what I mean? Like I say, it just kept me on my toes. So that is the mechanics and combat out of the way. So let's move on to performance, right? Now, anime games in general aren't super like processor heavy or whatever, are they? They're not like really, really intensive games to run. So I'll be honest, I was a little bit disappointed that the game was locked at 30 frames a second. Now that disappeared within like the first 3 or 4 hours of me playing the game, because I was just loving it by that point. But and I guess that is a privileged thing, because I've gotten so used to 60 FPS for the most part now. Like when the option is there in a game on my PS5, I will almost always play in performance mode rather than graphics mode, apart from a very, very few exceptions. Games like this, I guess, not as much of a big deal about that thing, because they're not dynamic action-based games. Do you know what I mean? Like a Final Fantasy 16 or, like a Spider-Man or something like that. Games that you're really heavily involved in the movement and you kind of make each action happen with a button press. Something like Elden Ring, for instance, was a massive one for this. I platinumed Elden Ring on the PS4 in 30 frames a second, and when I played it in 60 frames a second on the PS5, it was just like 10 times easier. I was just like, oh, it is ridiculous. Those extra frames really add to the gameplay. So the thing why it didn't really matter with Digimon is because ultimately it's a turn-based RPG. There's not much in the way of like, oh, you need to be, dynamic and, you need to be on the ball, and that it's all tactical essentially, rather than like, skill-based kind of thing. So it wasn't really a problem, but I was a bit disappointed at the start that it was only 30, but ultimately got through the entire game and absolutely loved it without being a problem. I suffered 0 crashes. I'd experienced basically no problems, nothing in the way of stutter. No, the draw distance was fine. I have a reasonably cheap 4K monitor and a base PS5, do you know what I mean? So I'm not rocking amazing gear by any stretch of the imagination. But for me, it ran really well. And ultimately, it's quite a lightweight game, do you know what I mean? It's actually very similar, for the most part, to the old Cyber Sleuth games. They've just massively improved the aesthetic of it all. The feeling is, it's all a bit quicker and stuff, and I guess a bit more dynamic. But for the most part, performance wasn't an issue for me. And that does lead me into the visuals, right? I love the way this game looks, honestly, man. That cel-shaded anime style game, it's like one of my favorite styles ever, man. I absolutely love it. I've played a few really, really good games in the last year or so with this kind of style. One of them being Fate Samurai Remnant. I think that game looks stunning. I played Dragon Ball Sparking Zero. Game also looks amazing. I love the way that this game looks. And it's an interesting thing, isn't it? Because Pokemon have really struggled to translate the charm of even their most iconic designs into this 3D space. But Digimon just haven't had that problem at all. I guess it's probably like a platform thing, right? Because Pokemon, the best software it's ever been available on is the Switch. But Zelda looks so good, man. So I still don't really buy that, to be honest. But it looks stunning, man. It looked absolutely stunning. Like I say, along with the storyline element, the The human characters were fairly uninspiring for the most part, but oh mate, some of the Digimon designs were just amazing, and the moves looked absolutely awesome. The special moves looked so good. All of the designs were really nostalgic and iconic, but also looked fresh and sharp and innovative of the genre in general. I can't really say anything but good stuff about how this game looked for me, because other than the 60 frames a second performance thing, I loved looking at this game for my 50 hours, 60 hours that I put into it. Do you know what I mean? It was just an absolute joy to watch start to finish. In terms of the visuals of your actual character, there was some little bits you could do in the way of like, you could change your outfit basically, and that for the most part involved changing your t-shirt or reverting back to the original kind of, you know, detective costume thing that you had on at the beginning. There was a load of DLC stuff. If you got the Ultimate Edition, then you got some like suave black suit. I did like the look of that, and I would have worn it if I had it. I got some white suit for like pre-ordering the game or whatever, but ultimately I just bombed around in t-shirts for the most part. But, you know, I wasn't too bothered about that. This isn't one of those games where like customization of the character was a huge focus for me, because ultimately the main thing you're doing is your Digimon team, right? But I will admit that is one thing that Pokemon has done quite well in the last few iterations. Pokemon Arceus, Legends Arceus in particular, I love the character customization in that game. But yeah, man, visuals, wicked. Absolutely love the way this game looks. So that's it, man. That is me done for the most part swooning about Digimon Story Time Stranger. What this really does for me is breed hope, right? Hope that not only is Digimon back, and with how successful this game has been, it's been very, very successful. I keep seeing concurrent Steam player figures being thrown around. And when that gets thrown around as much as this is, you know that's when a game's doing really well. But ultimately, I hope it breathes life into the genre, right? There is, you know, I've talked about it in a couple of videos recently. There is just such an issue with the Pokemon thing at the moment. And a lot of you guys that commented on my last video are all absolutely spot on about it. Pokemon are doing their absolute best to try and back anyone who wants to make a monster taming game into a corner and make, if anything, force them to innovate. It's interesting that something that someone commented was that I actually accidentally sort of justified a reason that Pokemon are doing this because they're not innovating. Do you know what I mean? So by their lack of innovation and use of lawsuits, by not letting people use mechanics that they have patented, they're forcing them to make new ones, right? And Pokemon have the money to be able to patent those mechanics as well. I guess if that's just how it works, I don't even know. But at the end of the day, what Digimon says to me is that there is a thirst for these types of games, right? And it's not just for kids, man. One thing I will say about this game in general, I guess for the most part, it's kind of kid-friendly. I think it's like a 12 or something, right? But there is stuff in this game that you would just not see in a Pokemon game. The Digimon designs, do you know what I mean? Some of those Digimon designs, man, they went all out. And I love it, man. And they are true to the originals as well. That's the thing, do you know what I mean? It's not like they've invented all of these Digimon designs specifically for this game. They've just unashamedly put them in there in their full glory. And there's other things as well, man. Like, I won't go into who or why or whatever, but one of the Digimon characters in this game is a raging alcoholic. Do you know what I mean? I absolutely love that. And it didn't make him like a bad character or anything. There was some acceptance about why this wasn't a good way to be. Do you know what I mean? And it did cause him some problems at some moments, but it showed like character development and stuff, man. I was like, okay, cool. I'm here for that because I am not a 12-year-old kid. I'm a 36-year-old man. And look, you're talking to me about the problems that I have seen in the real world. Do you know what I mean? And I kind of appreciated that Pokemon is just for kids, right? And not just for kids. Obviously, adults like Pokemon too. But Digimon definitely did its best to straddle the line between making a game that is appropriate for kids, but pushing the boundaries as much as they could into making sure that people that are a bit older had something in it as well, so they could get a bit more invested in it, other than just, oh, I like Digimon and I like the gameplay, but I'm just going to ignore everything else because it's specifically for kids. So that's it, guys. I'm going to wrap it up there. I hope you've enjoyed my review of Digimon Story Time Stranger. I absolutely loved this game, man. I really, really, really did. It was phenomenal. It was absolutely phenomenal. If I had, you know, I don't really like just throwing numbers out there because I just think it's you know, it's too easy to do a 7 out of 10 or whatever. Do you know what I mean? It's like, for me, in my heart of hearts, this game was an 8 out of 10. Was it perfect? No. But did I really, really enjoy it? Yes. I can only hope that this gets them to go, right, there's still a crowd of people that want to play these games. And what I really, really want them to do is properly reboot Digimon World, the Digimon World series, because, mate, for me, like, don't get me wrong, Digimon Story Time Stranger is the second best Digimon game I've ever played, and Digimon World on the PS1 is still the first. If they can take the same love, care, and attention that they put into this game and put it into the Digimon World idea and bring back that classic nostalgic charm, but give it the makeover that it absolutely needs and deserves with all of the Digimon and all of the technology that has come out since then, oh, mate, that'd be special. And like I say, I can only hope that how well this game has sold shows them that there is still a massive market for this kind of thing. So nice one, guys. I'm going to wrap it up there. Thanks very much for sticking around until the end of the video if you did. If you enjoyed this video and want to watch some more monster taming content, then check out this video right here, which is 10 more monster taming games to play after you finish Digimon Story Time Stranger. And even if you haven't played it, just check the video out if you want to play some monster taming games. Nice one, guys. I hope you've all had an absolutely wicked day, and I'll catch up with you very, very soon. Take it easy. Peace.